The morning sun cast long shadows across the military base as Sarah Martinez carefully cleaned the specialized rifle in her hands. The M2010 enhanced sniper rifle was a precision instrument, and she treated it with the respect it deserved. As a weapons maintenance specialist, Sarah had worked on hundreds of firearms during her 3 years at the base. But this particular rifle always caught her attention. The metal was cold against her fingers as she ran the cleaning cloth along the barrel. She had developed a routine over the months. Every surface needed to be spotless, every component functioning perfectly. Lives depended on the weapons she maintained, and that responsibility weighed heavily on her shoulders every single day. Sarah had grown up in a small town in Texas where her father ran a gun shop. She learned to handle firearms before she could properly ride a bicycle. Her father taught her that every weapon had a story, and treating them with care was both a duty and an art. When she enlisted in the military, weapons maintenance felt like a natural path. The base was unusually quiet that Tuesday morning. Most of the special operations teams were either training or deployed, leaving the armory relatively peaceful. Sarah preferred these quiet moments when she could focus entirely on her work without interruptions. She had always been detail-oriented, but military service had sharpened that trait into something almost obsessive. As she worked, Sarah noticed something she had missed before on the rifle's stock. There were small markings etched into the metal, almost invisible unless you looked at just the right angle. She leaned closer, adjusting her position to catch the light better. The markings appeared to be deliberate, carved with precision rather than accidental scratches from use. Her curiosity grew as she examined the etchings more carefully. They seemed to form a pattern, almost like tally marks but more sophisticated. Each mark was identical in size and depth, suggesting they had been made with the same tool over time. Sarah had seen similar markings on weapons before, usually indicating successful missions or significant events. The armory door opened with its characteristic squeak, interrupting her concentration. Sarah looked up to see Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez entering with a clipboard in his hand. He was making his daily rounds, checking on equipment status and maintenance schedules. Rodriguez had always been fair with the maintenance staff, understanding the critical nature of their work. "How's that M2010 coming along, Martinez?" Rodriguez asked, approaching her workstation. His voice carried the authority of someone who had spent decades in the military, but there was also genuine interest in his question. "Almost finished, Chief," Sarah replied, continuing her work. "Just noticed some interesting markings on the stock. Looks like someone took their time carving them." Rodriguez moved closer to examine the rifle. His expression shifted slightly when he saw the markings Sarah was referring to. There was recognition in his eyes, but also something else, perhaps caution or concern. "Those markings," Rodriguez said slowly. "They're not in the official documentation for this weapon. Have you seen anything like them before?" Sarah shook her head. She had worked on dozens of sniper rifles, but these particular etchings were unique. They had an almost ceremonial quality to them, as if each mark represented something significant to whoever had made them. The conversation was interrupted when the armory door opened again. This time a Navy SEAL entered the room. Sarah recognized him as Petty Officer First Class Jake Thompson, though she had never spoken with him directly. SEALs typically handled their own equipment when possible, so it was unusual to see one in the general armory. Thompson was tall and lean, with a quiet confidence that seemed common among special operations personnel. His eyes swept the room professionally before settling on Sarah and the rifle she was cleaning. When he spotted the M2010, his entire demeanor changed. He approached their workstation with purposeful steps. "Excuse me," Thompson said, his voice calm but intense. "I couldn't help but notice that rifle. Mind if I take a look?" Sarah glanced at Rodriguez, who nodded approval. She carefully handed the weapon to Thompson, watching as his hands moved over the metal with obvious familiarity. When his fingers found the markings on the stock, he froze completely. The silence in the armory became heavy as Thompson examined the etchings. His face showed a mixture of emotions that Sarah couldn't quite interpret: surprise, recognition, and something that might have been grief or respect. He ran his thumb over each marking with deliberate care. "Where did this rifle come from?" Thompson asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The casual tone from earlier was gone, replaced by something much more serious. Rodriguez checked his clipboard, flipping through several pages. It came in with a batch of equipment from Afghanistan about 6 months ago. Part of a redeployment shipment. Why? Is there something we should know about it? Thompson didn't answer immediately. He continued examining the rifle, paying particular attention to the scope mounts and trigger assembly. His inspection was thorough and professional, but Sarah could sense there was something personal about it as well. These markings, Thompson finally said, pointing to the etchings on the stock, they represent confirmed kills at extreme range. Each mark indicates a successful shot at over 5,000 meters. Sarah felt her breath catch. She had heard stories about extreme long-range shooting, but 5,000 meters was almost beyond imagination. At that distance, factors like wind, temperature, and even the rotation of the Earth became significant variables in a shot. Rodriguez leaned forward, his expression serious. "Are you certain about that?" Thompson nodded slowly. "I've only seen markings like this once before. The precision, the spacing, the depth, they follow a very specific tradition among a small group of elite snipers. Whoever used this rifle was operating at a level that very few people ever reach." The implications of Thompson's words settled over the armory like a heavy blanket. Sarah looked at the rifle with new eyes, understanding now that she had been cleaning something far more significant than just another piece of equipment. This weapon had a history written in metal and precision. As Thompson continued his examination, Sarah found herself wondering about the person who had carried this rifle. What kind of training and skill did it take to make shots at such incredible distances? What situations had required such extreme precision? The questions multiplied in her mind as she watched the SEAL's careful inspection. The morning sun had shifted position, sending different patterns of light through the armory windows. But the three people gathered around the workbench remained focused on the rifle and its mysterious markings, each understanding that they had discovered something far more important than routine maintenance. Thompson's hands remained steady as he examined every inch of the rifle, but Sarah could see tension building in his shoulders. The SEAL's inspection had moved beyond casual interest into something that resembled an investigation. He checked the serial numbers, examined the scope rings, and even looked inside the bolt mechanism. "Chief, I need to make a phone call," Thompson said, his voice carrying an urgency that hadn't been there before. "This rifle belongs to someone I know, someone who should have been listed as killed in action 8 months ago." Rodriguez straightened at those words. The implications were staggering. If the rifle belonged to someone presumed dead, how had it ended up in a routine equipment shipment? Sarah felt a chill run down her spine as she realized they might have stumbled onto something much bigger than unusual markings. "Are you absolutely certain?" Rodriguez asked, his voice taking on the careful tone of someone who understood that their next actions could have serious consequences. Thompson nodded grimly. "Staff Sergeant Marcus Cole. He was part of a classified mission in Afghanistan last year. His team was supposed to provide overwatch for a high-value target extraction. The mission went dark, and when the rescue team finally reached their position, they found evidence of a firefight but no survivors." Sarah listened intently as Thompson explained the situation. The idea that someone listed as killed in action might still be alive seemed like something from a movie. But the SEAL's serious demeanor suggested this was very real. "Cole was the best long-range shooter I ever worked with," Thompson continued. "He could make shots that other snipers wouldn't even attempt. These markings on his rifle, they represent some of the most difficult shots ever recorded in combat." Thompson pulled out his phone and stepped away from the workbench to make his call. Sarah could hear him speaking in low, urgent tones but couldn't make out the specific words. Rodriguez began gathering paperwork related to the rifle's arrival at the base. While they waited, Sarah found herself studying the weapon with new interest. Knowing that it belonged to someone with such extraordinary skill made every detail seem more significant. The wear patterns on the stock suggested thousands of rounds fired. The scope showed signs of careful adjustment and readjustment, indicating a shooter who constantly fine-tuned his equipment for maximum accuracy. "Martinez," Rodriguez said quietly, "I need you to document everything about this rifle. Take photographs of those markings, record the serial numbers, and note anything unusual about its condition. This is going to become evidence in what might be a very important investigation." Sarah nodded and began gathering the equipment she would need for proper documentation. As she worked, she couldn't stop thinking about Staff Sergeant Cole. What had happened during that mission in Afghanistan? How had his rifle ended up in a routine shipment if he was supposed to be dead? Thompson finished his phone call and returned to their workstation. His expression was even more serious than before, and Sarah could see that whatever he had learned during the call had not been good news. "I just spoke with my commanding officer," Thompson said. "He's contacting higher command about this situation. In the meantime, we need to secure this rifle and treat it as potential evidence in an ongoing investigation." Rodriguez immediately began the process of securing the weapon according to military protocol. Sarah continued her documentation, taking detailed photographs of each marking and recording precise measurements. The routine nature of these tasks helped calm her nerves, but she couldn't shake the feeling that they were dealing with something far beyond normal military operations. As she worked, Thompson began sharing more details about Staff Sergeant Cole. The picture that emerged was of an exceptional soldier who had pushed the boundaries of what was possible in long-range shooting. Cole had grown up hunting in the mountains of Montana, learning to judge wind and distance from his grandfather, who had been a sniper in Korea. Cole didn't just make long shots, Thompson explained. He made impossible shots, shots that saved lives and changed the outcome of missions. That rifle has been places and done things that most people couldn't imagine. Sarah found herself developing a deep respect for this soldier she had never met. The idea that someone could develop such extraordinary skill while serving their country was both inspiring and sobering. Each marking on the rifle represented not just a successful shot, but likely a life saved or a mission completed. The armory door opened again, and this time a lieutenant colonel entered. Sarah recognized him as Lieutenant Colonel Williams, the base operations officer. His presence meant that word about their discovery had already reached high levels of command. Williams approached their workstation with the measured pace of someone accustomed to dealing with serious situations. His eyes immediately went to the rifle, then to each person present. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone who expected immediate compliance. "Petty Officer Thompson, I understand you've identified this weapon as belonging to a soldier listed as killed in action. I need you to brief me on everything you know about Staff Sergeant Cole and the circumstances of his presumed death." Thompson provided a concise but thorough briefing about Cole's background, skills, and the failed mission in Afghanistan. Williams listened without interruption, occasionally taking notes on a small pad he carried. Sarah could see that the information was being treated with the highest level of seriousness. "Specialist Martinez," Williams said, turning to Sarah, "I need you to complete your documentation immediately. Every detail about this rifle needs to be recorded and preserved. Chief Rodriguez, I want this weapon secured in evidence storage within the hour." Sarah worked quickly to finish her documentation, aware that she was now part of what appeared to be a significant military investigation. The photographs she took might help determine what had happened to Staff Sergeant Cole and his team. The weight of that responsibility was both intimidating and motivating. As she completed her work, Sarah couldn't help but wonder what would happen next. Would they discover that Cole was still alive somewhere? Had he escaped from the failed mission and been unable to contact his command? The possibilities were both hopeful and terrifying. Thompson remained at the workstation, answering questions from Lieutenant Colonel Williams about Cole's abilities and the nature of their previous missions together. The conversation revealed a deep respect between the two soldiers and hinted at operations that were far more dangerous and complex than Sarah had imagined. The morning that had started as routine maintenance had transformed into something that might change lives and reveal military secrets. Sarah realized that her simple job of cleaning weapons had connected her to a story that was still being written, involving courage, skill, and mysteries that reached across continents and through time. Within hours of Lieutenant Colonel Williams's arrival, the base transformed into a hub of intense activity. Sarah watched from her workstation as personnel she had never seen before began arriving at the armory. Men and women in civilian clothes mixed with high-ranking military officers, all focused on the rifle that had been in her hands just that morning. A secure area was established in the armory's back room, with access restricted to personnel with appropriate clearances. Sarah found herself in the unusual position of being a key witness to the rifle's discovery, which meant she was interviewed multiple times by different investigators. Each interview covered the same basic questions, but the investigators seemed to be looking for details that others might have missed. Thompson had been reassigned to assist with the investigation, his knowledge of Staff Sergeant Cole making him invaluable to the team trying to piece together what had happened. Sarah could see the strain on his face as he answered questions about his fallen comrade. The possibility that Cole might be alive was clearly affecting him deeply. The last communication from Cole's team came at 0347 hours on March 15th. Thompson explained to a group of investigators. They were providing overwatch for an extraction team that was pulling a high-value intelligence asset out of a compound near the Pakistan border. Sarah listened from her nearby workstation. As Thompson described the mission that had gone wrong, the extraction team had successfully retrieved their target, but Cole's sniper team was supposed to provide covering fire during the withdrawal. When the extraction team reached the designated rally point, Cole's team never appeared. The search and rescue operation found evidence of a significant firefight at Cole's position. Thompson continued. Shell casings from his rifle, bloodstains, and signs that the position had been overrun. But no bodies were recovered. This detail sent a chill through Sarah. If no bodies were found, what had actually happened to Cole and his team? The discovery of his rifle suggested he had survived at least long enough for the weapon to be separated from him. But under what circumstances? One of the civilian investigators, a woman who had introduced herself only as Agent Martinez, approached Sarah's workstation. Her manner was professional but not unfriendly, and she seemed genuinely interested in Sarah's observations about the rifle. Specialist Martinez, I know you've already answered these questions several times, but I need you to think carefully about the condition of that rifle when you first examined it, Agent Martinez said. Was there anything that suggested it had been used recently? Sarah thought back to her initial inspection of the weapon. She had been focused on routine maintenance, but now she tried to remember every detail with the understanding that it might be important evidence. The barrel showed signs of recent cleaning, Sarah said slowly. Not just field maintenance, but a thorough cleaning. Someone had taken care to remove all residue and ensure the weapon was in perfect condition. Agent Martinez made notes as Sarah spoke. What about the markings on the stock? Did they appear fresh, or were they weathered like the rest of the rifle? Sarah closed her eyes, trying to visualize exactly what she had seen. The markings were definitely older than any recent cleaning. They had been there for a while, but they were still crisp. Someone had taken time to make them properly, not just scratches made in a hurry. The investigation continued throughout the day, with teams working to trace the rifle's path from Afghanistan to the base. Sarah learned that the weapon had been part of a large shipment of equipment that had gone through multiple transfer points before arriving at their location. Tracking its exact route would take time and cooperation from several different military units. As evening approached, Sarah was finally allowed to return to her normal duties. Though she remained available for additional questions, the armory felt different now, charged with an energy that hadn't been there before. What had started as a routine day had become part of what was clearly a significant military investigation. Thompson found her cleaning another weapon later that evening. The stress of the day showed in his face, but he seemed determined to share what he knew about his missing comrade. Cole wasn't just an exceptional shooter, Thompson said, settling onto a stool near Sarah's workstation. He was the kind of soldier who would never leave a teammate behind. If he survived that firefight, he would have done everything possible to complete his mission and protect his team. Sarah could hear the respect and affection in Thompson's voice. What do you think happened to him? Thompson was quiet for a long moment, staring at the rifle Sarah was currently cleaning. There are a lot of possibilities, and most of them aren't good. But the fact that his rifle made it back suggests that maybe, somehow, he found a way to survive. The conversation was interrupted when Chief Rodriguez approached with new information from the investigation team. His expression suggested that they had discovered something significant. Thompson, they want to see you in the secure area, Rodriguez said. Something about satellite imagery from the time of Cole's mission. Thompson immediately headed toward the back room, leaving Sarah and Rodriguez alone in the main armory. The chief sat down heavily in the chair Thompson had vacated, looking older than Sarah had ever seen him. In 30 years of military service, I've never seen anything quite like this, Rodriguez said. The level of interest from command, the resources being committed to this investigation, it suggests that Cole and his mission were far more important than anyone initially realized. Sarah continued her work, but her mind was focused on the mystery unfolding around them. The idea that a single rifle could trigger such an extensive investigation spoke to the significance of what they had discovered. Somewhere in the chain of evidence and testimony, There were answers about what had happened to Staff Sergeant Cole. As the evening wore on, more personnel arrived at the base. Sarah could see vehicles with government plates in the parking areas, and the security around the armory had been significantly increased. Whatever Cole had been involved in, it was clear that his disappearance and the appearance of his rifle had implications that reached far beyond a single missing soldier. Late that night, as Sarah was finally preparing to leave the armory, Agent Martinez approached her one more time. The investigator looked tired but determined, carrying a folder thick with documents and photographs. "Specialist Martinez, I want to thank you for your attention to detail today," Agent Martinez said. "Your observations about that rifle may prove to be crucial in determining what happened to Staff Sergeant Cole and his team." Sarah felt a mix of pride and concern at those words. She had simply been doing her job, but apparently her routine work had uncovered something that multiple intelligence agencies now considered vital. The responsibility was both flattering and somewhat frightening. As she walked to her quarters that night, Sarah found herself looking up at the stars and wondering where Marcus Cole might be. Was he alive somewhere trying to find his way home? Had he been captured and was now hoping someone would realize he wasn't dead? The questions followed her into sleep, where dreams mixed rifle maintenance with international intrigue and missing soldiers. 3 days after the discovery of Cole's rifle, Sarah was summoned to a briefing room she had never entered before. The space was sterile and windowless, with a large conference table surrounded by chairs that had clearly seen important meetings. When she arrived, she found herself facing a panel of officers and civilians that represented the highest levels of military and intelligence leadership. Lieutenant Colonel Williams sat at the head of the table, flanked by Agent Martinez and several other individuals whose credentials Sarah could only guess at. Thompson was also present, looking like he hadn't slept well in days. The atmosphere in the room was tense with the weight of classified information and life-or-death decisions. "Specialist Martinez," Lieutenant Colonel Williams began, "what I'm about to share with you is classified at the highest levels. Your role in discovering Staff Sergeant Cole's rifle, combined with your technical expertise with weapon systems, makes you an important part of this investigation." Sarah felt her heart rate increase as she realized she was about to learn information that could change everything she thought she knew about the situation. She nodded her understanding and waited for the briefing to continue. Agent Martinez opened a laptop and projected an image onto the wall screen. It showed satellite footage of a mountainous region that Sarah assumed was somewhere in Afghanistan. The image quality was remarkably clear, showing terrain features and what appeared to be structures built into the mountainside. "This is imagery from the area where Staff Sergeant Cole's team was operating when they went missing," Agent Martinez explained. "What you're seeing is from approximately 6 hours after their last radio contact." The image changed to show the same area from a different angle. Sarah could see evidence of an explosion or firefight, scorch marks on the ground and debris scattered around what had been Cole's sniper position, but there were also details that seemed inconsistent with a simple overrun scenario. "Notice the pattern of the debris field," Agent Martinez continued. "The damage suggests that Cole's team didn't just defend their position. They conducted a fighting withdrawal. Someone with advanced tactical training orchestrated a retreat that allowed them to evade immediate capture." Thompson leaned forward in his chair, studying the satellite images with intense interest. "That sounds like Cole. He would never just sit in a static position if the situation deteriorated. He would adapt and find a way to keep fighting." The next image showed a different location several miles from the original sniper position. Here the satellite had captured what appeared to be a small camp or temporary shelter, hidden in a rocky outcropping. The structures were well camouflaged and would have been nearly invisible to ground-based observation. "This camp appeared approximately 2 weeks after Cole's team went missing," Agent Martinez said. "Intelligence analysts believe it was established by someone with extensive survival and evasion training. Someone who knew they needed to remain hidden while planning their next move." Sarah studied the images, trying to understand the implications of what she was seeing. "Are you saying that Staff Sergeant Cole survived the initial attack and established this camp?" Lieutenant Colonel Williams nodded gravely. "That's our working theory. But the story gets more complicated from there." The presentation continued with a series of images showing the camp's evolution over several months. Additional structures appeared, suggesting that whoever was living there had access to resources and was planning for an extended stay. There were also signs of movement between the camp and various other Locations in the region. Intelligence intercepts suggest that someone was conducting reconnaissance missions. Throughout this period, Agent Martinez explained, short-duration trips to gather information about enemy positions and activities. The pattern suggests a professional soldier working alone or with a very small team. Thompson's expression had grown increasingly hopeful as the briefing progressed. The possibility that his friend and teammate had not only survived, but had continued operating in enemy territory, was both inspiring and terrifying. "What happened to the camp?" Thompson asked. "The satellite images stopped showing activity after about 4 months." Agent Martinez switched to a new set of images showing the camp area. The structures were gone, and there was evidence of a hasty departure. Personal items were scattered around the site, suggesting that whoever had been living there had left quickly, possibly under pressure. "This is where the trail goes cold," Agent Martinez admitted. "We lost track of whoever was operating from this location. There's no evidence of capture or casualties, just a sudden disappearance." Sarah raised her hand tentatively, still uncertain about her role in this high-level briefing. How does Cole's rifle fit into this timeline? When did it leave Afghanistan? Lieutenant Colonel Williams consulted a folder of documents before answering. The rifle was logged into an equipment shipment approximately 2 months after the camp was abandoned. It was processed through standard channels and eventually ended up at our base. The timeline created more questions than answers. If Cole had been operating from the hidden camp for months after his presumed death, how had his rifle ended up in a routine equipment shipment? Had he been forced to abandon it? Had he deliberately sent it back through military channels as some kind of message? "There's one more piece of information that makes this situation even more complex," Agent Martinez said, switching to a new image. This one showed a photograph of what appeared to be a handwritten note in English. Sarah could see that the handwriting was careful and deliberate, written by someone who wanted to ensure the message would be understood clearly. The note was brief, but its implications were staggering. This note was discovered by a patrol in a dead drop location, commonly used by intelligence assets. Agent Martinez explained. The handwriting analysis indicates it was written by Staff Sergeant Cole. Thompson stood up to read the note more clearly. His face showed a mixture of relief, concern, and confusion as he processed the message. "He's alive," Thompson said quietly. "But he's not coming home." Sarah felt her breath catch as she realized what Thompson had understood from the note. Staff Sergeant Cole was not only alive but was apparently choosing to remain in the field for reasons that weren't immediately clear. The note indicates that Cole has assumed a deep cover identity and is conducting long-term intelligence gathering operations. Lieutenant Colonel Williams explained. He's requesting that his status remain classified and that no rescue attempts be made. The briefing room fell silent as everyone processed this information. The idea that a soldier would voluntarily remain behind enemy lines cut off from all support was both heroic and deeply troubling. What kind of mission could be important enough to justify such a sacrifice? Agent Martinez closed her laptop and looked around the table at each person present. "This brings us to why you're all here. We need to determine our next course of action. Do we respect Cole's apparent wishes and leave him in place? Do we attempt to extract him against his will? Or do we try to establish communication and provide support for whatever mission he's conducting?" Sarah realized that she was present not just as a witness to the rifle's discovery, but because her technical knowledge might be needed for whatever decision was made. The routine maintenance that had started this entire investigation had led to her being included in decisions that could affect national security and determine the fate of a missing soldier. As the discussion continued, Sarah found herself thinking about the dedication and sacrifice that Cole's decision represented. He had chosen to remain in one of the most dangerous places on Earth, cut off from his family and teammates, in service of some mission that he believed was more important than his own safety or comfort. The decision-making process stretched over several days, with high-level consultations reaching into the Pentagon and intelligence agencies that Sarah had only heard about in movies. She found herself in the strange position of being both a junior enlisted soldier and a crucial witness in discussions that could affect international operations. During this period, Thompson shared more details about Cole's background and capabilities. The picture that emerged was of a soldier who had been preparing for exactly this type of situation throughout his military career. Cole had studied languages, cultural customs, and survival techniques that went far beyond standard military training. Cole spoke fluent Pashto and Dari, Thompson explained during one of their conversations in the armory. He understood the tribal structures in Afghanistan better than most intelligence officers. If anyone could blend in and operate independently in that environment, it would be him. Sarah continued her regular duties while the investigation continued, but she found it difficult to focus on routine maintenance when she knew that somewhere in Afghanistan, an American soldier was operating alone in extremely dangerous conditions. Every rifle she cleaned reminded her of Cole's M2010 and the story it had revealed. Agent Martinez approached Sarah with the unusual request during the fourth day of the investigation. She needed Sarah's expertise to examine other weapons that had been recovered from Afghanistan around the same time as Cole's rifle. The goal was to determine if any of them showed signs of modification or use that might provide additional clues about Cole's activities. The examination revealed several interesting details. 2 other sniper rifles showed signs of being used for extremely long-range shots, with modifications that were consistent with Cole's known techniques. More significantly, one of the rifles had been equipped with a suppressor that wasn't standard military issue, suggesting access to specialized equipment. These modifications require specific tools and materials, Sarah explained to Agent Martinez. Whoever made these changes had access to a well-equipped workshop and knew exactly what they were doing. This information suggested that Cole hadn't been operating entirely alone. Someone had been providing him with support, equipment, and possibly intelligence. The question was whether this support was coming from friendly forces or if Cole had developed relationships with local allies. The breakthrough in the investigation came from an unexpected source. A routine analysis of radio intercepts from the region where Cole had been operating revealed several transmissions in a code that matched patterns used by American Special Operations Forces. The transmissions were brief and cryptic, but they suggested ongoing intelligence gathering activities. Lieutenant Colonel Williams called Sarah to another briefing, this time with an even larger group of officials. The conference room was crowded with personnel from multiple agencies, all focused on developing a response to what they now understood was an active operation rather than a missing soldier situation. Based on our analysis of all available information, we've determined that Staff Sergeant Cole is conducting authorized intelligence operations under deep cover, Lieutenant Colonel Williams announced. His apparent death was part of a carefully planned deception designed to allow him to operate without enemy forces looking for a missing American soldier. The revelation that Cole's disappearance had been planned rather than accidental changed everything. Sarah realized that she had been part of discovering not a tragedy, but an ongoing success story. Cole's rifle had been deliberately sent back through military channels as a way of communicating his status without compromising his cover. Thompson looked both relieved and concerned at this news. If Cole is operating under deep cover, why are we having this discussion? Shouldn't we just let him continue his mission? Agent Martinez stood to address the room. The situation has become complicated because of external factors. Intelligence indicates that enemy forces are beginning to suspect that reports of Cole's death were false. His cover may be compromised, which puts both him and his mission at risk. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications. If Cole's cover was blown, he would be in immediate danger from forces that would be eager to capture or kill an American operative. The question now was whether they could extract him before his situation became impossible. We have a narrow window of opportunity to establish communication and coordinate the extraction if necessary, Lieutenant Colonel Williams explained. But we need someone with intimate knowledge of Cole's methods and capabilities to make contact. All eyes in the room turned to Thompson, who clearly understood what was being asked of him. The mission would require him to enter the same dangerous territory where Cole had been operating, locate him without alerting enemy forces, and coordinate whatever action was necessary to ensure his safety. Sarah found herself volunteering for a role she had never expected. If you're planning a mission to locate Staff Sergeant Cole, you'll need someone who understands his equipment and can verify his identity through technical means. His rifle and other weapons have specific characteristics that only someone familiar with them would recognize. The suggestion sparked a lengthy debate about operational security and the advisability of sending non-combat personnel into a dangerous area. However, Sarah's unique knowledge of Cole's equipment and her role in discovering the rifle made her perspective valuable to the mission planners. Over the following days, a complex operation took shape. Thompson would lead a small team into Afghanistan with the mission of locating Cole and assessing his situation. Sarah would provide technical support and equipment analysis from a forward operating base, using her expertise to help identify and authenticate any evidence of Cole's activities. The preparation for the mission revealed just how extensive Cole's operation had become. Intelligence analysts had identified multiple locations where he might be operating, based on patterns of activity and radio intercepts. The scope of his intelligence gathering appeared to cover several provinces and involved monitoring multiple terrorist and insurgent organizations. As the departure date approached, Sarah found herself both excited and terrified about her expanded role. She had enlisted to maintain weapons and equipment, not to support classified intelligence operations in combat zones. But the discovery of Cole's rifle had connected her to a story that was far from over. The night before the team's departure, Thompson found Sarah in the armory, conducting what might be her final routine maintenance duties for some time. He sat down beside her workstation, looking like someone who was preparing for a mission that could change everything. Cole always said that the most important thing in any operation was attention to detail, Thompson said. Small things that most people would overlook could make the difference between success and failure. Your observation about those markings on his rifle proves that point. Sarah looked up from the weapon she was cleaning, understanding that Thompson was trying to prepare her for what lay ahead. What do you think we'll find when we locate him? Thompson was quiet for a long moment, considering the question carefully. I think we'll find a soldier who has sacrificed everything for his mission. The question is whether he's ready to come home, or if he believes his work isn't finished. As they prepared to leave for Afghanistan, Sarah realized that her routine discovery of unusual markings on a rifle had led to a mission that could determine the fate of an American hero who had been presumed dead for months. The story that had begun with simple weapons maintenance was about to reach its climax in the mountains of Afghanistan, where courage and dedication would be tested against impossible odds. The forward operating base in Afghanistan was a stark contrast to the comfortable armory where Sarah had discovered Cole's rifle. Dust seemed to coat everything within minutes of cleaning, and the constant sound of helicopters and vehicles created a backdrop of organized chaos that never stopped. Sarah had been in country for 3 days, adapting to the rhythm of military operations in an active combat zone. Thompson's team had been conducting reconnaissance missions into the areas where Cole was believed to be operating. Each sortie brought back new intelligence, but no direct contact with their target. The challenge was enormous, locating one man in terrain that offered countless hiding places while avoiding the enemy forces that controlled much of the region. Sarah spent her time analyzing equipment and intelligence reports, looking for patterns that might reveal Cole's location or activities. Her technical expertise proved valuable in ways she hadn't expected. Radio intercepts, equipment modifications, and even the type of ammunition being used in various incidents all provided clues about Cole's ongoing operations. On the 4th day, Thompson returned from a mission with news that changed everything. His team had discovered another cache of equipment that bore the unmistakable signs of Cole's handiwork. More importantly, they had found evidence that Cole was not only alive but actively conducting operations against high-value terrorist targets. He's been systematic about it, Thompson explained during the mission briefing. Cole has identified and eliminated several key figures in the insurgent network. Each operation was planned and executed with the kind of precision that only someone with his skills could achieve. The evidence included spent shell casings from locations where known terrorist leaders had been killed over the past several months. Ballistics analysis confirmed that the shots had been fired by Cole's rifle, using his distinctive shooting techniques. What had initially appeared to be random insurgent casualties were actually the result of a methodical campaign conducted by one man, Agent Martinez, who had flown in to oversee the operation, studied the intelligence reports with obvious admiration. Cole has single-handedly disrupted several terrorist cells and eliminated targets that conventional operations couldn't touch. His intelligence value is enormous. However, the success of Cole's mission was also creating new dangers. Enemy forces were beginning to recognize the pattern of precise, long-range eliminations, They were actively searching for the sniper who had been systematically destroying their leadership structure. Counter-sniper teams and increased security measures were making Cole's operations increasingly difficult and dangerous. The breakthrough came when Sarah identified a pattern in the radio intercepts that others had missed. Her experience with weapons maintenance gave her insight into the logistical requirements for Cole's type of operation. Someone was providing him with specialized ammunition and equipment on a regular schedule. "Look at the timing of these intercepts," Sarah explained, pointing to a map covered with colored pins. "They correspond with the lunar cycles. Cole is conducting resupply operations during the darkest nights each month." This observation led Thompson's team to the location where they finally made contact with their target. The meeting occurred in a remote valley that provided excellent visibility in all directions, exactly the type of location that someone with Cole's training would choose for a clandestine rendezvous. Sarah remained at the forward operating base during the actual contact, monitoring radio communications and analyzing any intelligence that Thompson's team transmitted. When Thompson's voice came through the radio announcing successful contact with Cole, Sarah felt a mixture of relief and anticipation that surprised her with its intensity. The reunion between Thompson and Cole was emotional, but brief. Cole had been operating alone for so long that normal social interaction felt foreign to him. He had adapted to his environment so completely that returning to military structure would require significant readjustment. Cole's physical condition showed the effects of months of independent operation in harsh conditions. He was leaner than Thompson remembered, with the weathered appearance of someone who had been living outdoors for extended periods. But his eyes retained the sharp focus that had made him such an effective sniper. The conversation revealed the full scope of Cole's mission and its importance to regional security. He had not only been eliminating high-value targets, but also gathering intelligence about terrorist networks that conventional sources couldn't penetrate. His reports detailed weapons shipments, training camps, and planned attacks that intelligence agencies had been unable to detect through other means. "I've been in contact with my handlers through secure channels," Cole explained during the debriefing. "My official status as killed in action allows me to operate without the enemy looking for a missing American soldier. It's the perfect cover for this type of long-term intelligence operation." However, Cole also confirmed that his cover was indeed becoming compromised. Enemy forces were getting closer to identifying him as the source of their leadership casualties. Several times in recent weeks, he had been forced to abandon positions when enemy patrols came too close to his hideouts. The decision about Cole's future became the focus of intense discussion between field commanders and headquarters. His intelligence value was enormous, but the risks to his safety were increasing daily. There was also the question of how long one person could maintain such an isolated and dangerous existence. Sarah found herself part of these discussions because of her unique perspective on Cole's equipment and methods. Her analysis of his ammunition usage and equipment wear patterns provided insights into his operational tempo and stress levels that helped commanders understand the sustainability of his mission. Cole made the final decision himself during a secure video conference with senior leadership. He requested permission to continue his mission for another 6 months, with enhanced support and improved extraction options if his cover was completely blown. His argument was compelling. The intelligence he was gathering was preventing terrorist attacks and saving lives. The conference approved Cole's request, but with conditions designed to improve his safety and communication capabilities. Sarah would remain in theater to provide technical support and equipment analysis. Thompson would establish a support network that could respond quickly if Cole needed extraction or assistance. As the team prepared for the next phase of the operation, Sarah reflected on how much her life had changed since that morning, when she had noticed unusual markings on a rifle. Her routine job had connected her to a story of extraordinary courage and dedication that was still unfolding. 3 weeks later, Sarah received a package through secure military channels. Inside was a small piece of metal with her initials engraved on it, along with a brief note from Cole, thanking her for her attention to detail and her role in ensuring his mission could continue. The note reminded Sarah that military service often connected people in unexpected ways. Her careful maintenance of equipment had revealed a story of survival and heroism that might otherwise have remained hidden. Cole was still out there somewhere in the mountains of Afghanistan, conducting his lonely and dangerous mission. Back at the forward operating base, Sarah continued her work supporting Cole's operation and others like it. She had learned that weapons maintenance was about more than just keeping equipment functional. It was about preserving the stories and connections that gave meaning to military service. Every rifle she cleaned might have its own story of courage, sacrifice, and dedication. Some of those stories would remain hidden, known only to the soldiers who carried the weapons into combat. But others, like Cole's, would emerge when someone took the time to notice the details that revealed extraordinary lives lived in service of something greater than themselves. The markings on Cole's rifle had been his way of recording history, documenting achievements that few people would ever know about. Sarah's discovery of those markings had ensured that Cole's story would not be lost, and that his mission could continue with the support he needed to succeed. As she worked in the dusty armory of the forward operating base, Sarah understood that she was now part of that story, connected forever to a soldier whose dedication and skill had made him a legend among those who knew the truth about his mission.